I was standing on the balcony of our cruise cabin, gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles were white, staring at the endless stretch of dark water below, and all I could think was, how did this happen? Just 12 hours earlier, I'd been the perfect husband, the guy who had pulled off the ultimate surprise for our 10-year anniversary, a luxury cruise she'd always dreamed of. I had imagined her eyes lighting up when she saw the ship, the way she'd run her hands along the polished railings, how she'd laugh in disbelief when she realized it was all for her. And she had smiled at first. She'd even hugged me, whispered, "You're amazing." But now, here I was, watching her from a distance through the cabin's sliding glass door, as she sat on the bed with her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low, sharp, urgent. Not talking to her mother, not talking to a friend, talking to him. The man I didn't even know existed until tonight. My heart had been pounding so hard I thought the people in the cabin next to us might hear it. I had walked in on her earlier, in the ship's observation lounge, her hand brushing against his, the two of them leaning in close like the world had disappeared around them. And when I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch. She just looked at me, almost bored, and said, "We'll talk later." I had spent months planning this trip in secret. I'd saved money quietly, worked late shifts she didn't even know about, also I could afford the best stateroom, the best dining package, the excursions to the islands she told me about when we were first dating. I thought this was going to be the trip where we remembered why we fell in love, the trip that reignited something we'd both let go dim over the years. But now, every detail I'd chosen so carefully felt like a setup for my own humiliation. She had been distant lately, sure. We'd had more arguments over little things, who forgot to buy milk, why I didn't fold the laundry the right way, but I never imagined it was because she was sharing her time, her thoughts, maybe her love with someone else. And now I was trapped on a floating city with her for 6 more nights, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and nowhere to pretend everything was fine. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, but I had never felt so cornered. I could confront her and risk an ugly public scene, or I could keep quiet, watch, gather proof, and destroy her with the truth once we were back on land. But every hour I waited was another hour of pretending, another hour of wondering how deep her betrayal went. And the worst part? Some part of me still wanted to fix it, to understand it, to believe that this wasn't the end. That maybe, just maybe, I hadn't completely lost her yet. But the way she laughed softly into the phone, her voice dropping to that tone she used to use only with me, told me I was already too late. 3 months earlier, if you told me I'd be standing on the deck of a luxury cruise ship questioning my entire marriage, I would have laughed. Back then, all I could think about was how to pull off the perfect anniversary surprise. We'd been through a rough couple of years. Her job had her traveling constantly, mine had me working weekends, and somewhere in the middle of all that, our conversations had shrunk down to grocery lists and bills. I told myself that wasn't unusual after a decade together. Life gets busy, people get tired. But I believed deep down that if we could just break out of the routine, we'd find each other again. The cruise was supposed to be that escape. She told me once, years ago, about this dream she had, to wake up to nothing but the sound of waves, to watch the sun rise over the horizon from her own balcony, to have nowhere to be and no one to answer to for a week. I had remembered every word, stored it away like a secret I could give back to her someday. So I worked for it. Quietly. I picked up extra shifts at the warehouse, stayed late logging inventory, and told her I had paperwork, so she wouldn't suspect anything. Every time I felt like quitting, I pictured her face when I told her. And I went all in. Top deck balcony stateroom, fine dining package, couples massage on the second day, a private excursion to a secluded beach. I even made a playlist of our old songs to surprise her with on the first night. I imagined us dancing under the stars, laughing like we used to. There were warning signs, I guess. She started coming home later than usual, saying she'd been working late, or grabbing drinks with coworkers. She was on her phone more, smiling at messages she didn't share. Once I asked who it was, and she said, "Just Jen from the office," without looking up. I told myself I was overthinking. She'd always been private with her phone, that didn't mean anything. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and see the glow of her screen as she lay turned away from me. When I asked what she was doing, she'd say she couldn't sleep and was just scrolling. Still, I pushed the doubts down. I told myself that once we were on the ship, away from all the distractions, things would feel like they used to. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was distant because she thought I didn't notice her anymore. I wanted this trip to be proof that I did. I booked it all under the radar, told her we were going to a small coastal hotel for the weekend, packed her suitcase for her while she was at work. I even printed fake confirmation emails so she wouldn't guess. The morning of our anniversary, I drove us to the port. When she saw the ship towering over the water, her eyes widened and she covered her mouth with her hands. "You didn't," she whispered. I grinned and said, "Happy anniversary." She hugged me tight, kissed me, and for a second, it felt worth it, all the extra hours, all the secrecy. But looking back now, I wonder if that smile was for me, or for the thought of having him there too. Boarding the ship felt like stepping into another world. The air smelled faintly of salt and sunscreen, the kind of scent that makes you believe you've left your real life behind on the shore. Crew members in crisp uniforms welcomed us with wide smiles and trays of champagne flutes. She slipped her arm through mine, leaning close, and for a while, I let myself believe everything was perfect. We took the elevator up to our deck, the polished brass walls reflecting our faces side by side. I saw her grinning at her reflection, tilting her head just so, the way she always did when she wanted to look effortlessly beautiful. Our stateroom was exactly as I'd hoped. Spacious, warm lights spilling across the king-sized bed, a little sitting area by the glass doors that opened onto a private balcony with a view of nothing but open water. She gasped when she saw it, rushing over to slide the door open and step out. "Oh my God!" she said, her hair whipping around in the ocean breeze. "This is perfect." I followed her out, and for the first time in months, I saw her eyes soften. She kissed me then, slow and warm, and for a moment I thought maybe all my doubts were just my own insecurities talking. We unpacked, and I suggested we go explore the ship before the safety drill. She agreed, but halfway down the hallway, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her smile faltered just slightly, so slightly I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching her so closely. She typed out a quick reply, slipped the phone back into her bag, and caught up with me. "Work stuff," she said before I could ask. "Just letting Jen know I'm unreachable for a week." The afternoon was a blur of polished lounges, glass elevators, and the endless spread of the buffet. She seemed genuinely impressed, leaning against the railing as we watched the ship pull away from the port, pointing out tiny fishing boats bobbing in the distance. We had dinner at one of the specialty restaurants, candlelight flickering between us. She laughed at my terrible jokes, touched my hand across the table, and I felt that same rush I'd felt when I first met her. But later, as we walked back to our cabin, she lagged behind. I turned and saw her standing near a row of porthole windows, phone in hand again, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. She didn't see me watching. Her lips curved, not the broad, open smile she gave me, but a smaller, private one. She typed something quickly, tucked the phone away, and when she caught up to me, she reached for my hand like nothing had happened. I told myself not to ruin the night. Maybe it was Jen. Maybe it was someone from her family. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a seed of doubt began to take root, and I couldn't shake it, no matter how much I tried. The second day started exactly how I'd imagined, sunlight streaming in through the balcony doors, the gentle sway of the ship, the sound of waves muffled against the hull. She was already awake, sitting out on the balcony with a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She looked peaceful at first glance, but when she noticed me in the doorway, she locked the screen quickly and set it face down on the table. "Morning," she said, smiling, but her voice had that overly bright tone she used when she was covering something. We had breakfast in the main dining room, white tablecloths and waiters pouring fresh orange juice like we were royalty. She was chatty, talking about how much she wanted to try the rock climbing wall, how the spa looked amazing. But every few minutes, her gaze flicked toward the entrance like she was expecting someone. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who ruined the trip with accusations. After breakfast, we explored the upper decks. There was a live band playing near the pool, and she stopped to listen, swaying to the music. That's when I noticed him for the first time. Tall, dark hair, wearing a navy polo shirt and sunglasses. He was leaning casually against the railing, a drink in hand, but his eyes were on her, focused, familiar. She noticed him too. Just for a second, her expression shifted, surprise, then something warmer, before she turned back to me. "Let's check out the observation lounge," she said quickly. The lounge was quieter, all floor-to-ceiling windows and soft chairs arranged in clusters. We found a spot in the corner, and I tried to lose myself in the view. She excused herself to go to the restroom, but instead of heading toward the door, I saw her in the reflection of the glass wall, veering toward the man from the pool deck. They spoke briefly, her body angled toward him in a way that felt too familiar. He leaned in, said something that made her smile. She touched his arm lightly before slipping away. When she came back, she acted like nothing had happened. "Ready to go?" she asked, her tone breezy. I nodded, but inside my chest felt tight. I told myself maybe they'd met on the ship before, maybe it was a coincidence, but that seed of doubt from the first night was sprouting fast now, and I couldn't unsee the way she looked at him. That night was the captain's gala, formal wear, champagne towers, live music in the grand atrium. I wore the suit she'd picked out for me months ago, and she appeared in a dark green dress I'd never seen before, one that clung to her in a way that made heads turn as we walked. She looked breathtaking, and for a moment, I let myself believe the night might smooth over the strange undercurrent between us that we mingled with other couples, posed for the ship's photographers, clinked glasses over lobster tails and filet mignon. She laughed easily, but every now and then, her eyes would scan the room. I followed her gaze more than once and saw him, the man from earlier, always within sight, talking to other guests but never far. After dinner, there was dancing in the atrium. The band played something slow, and I asked her to dance. She hesitated for half a second before slipping her hand into mine. We moved together under the golden lights, the hum of voices around us blending into the music. Then, mid-song, she leaned close and whispered, "I need to go freshen up." I watched her walk toward the staircase instead of the restroom nearby. Something in me snapped. I followed, keeping my distance. She descended one level to a quieter lounge where only a few people lingered. And there he was, waiting. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that was nothing like the one she'd given me earlier. They didn't touch right away. They just stood close, talking in low tones. I couldn't hear the words, but the way she tilted her head, the way his hand eventually brushed her arm, it was enough. She glanced around once, quickly, and he leaned in, his lips near her ear. She laughed softly, a laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. My stomach turned. I stepped back before either of them could spot me, my mind racing. This wasn't some casual acquaintance, or a random conversation. There was history here. Intimacy. And I was suddenly certain, this trip wasn't just an anniversary for us. It was a rendezvous for them. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, barely hearing the music or the chatter around me. By the time we got back to our cabin, I couldn't decide if I should confront her outright or wait until I had undeniable proof. But one thing was clear, the cruise I'd planned to save our marriage was becoming the trip that might end it. The next morning, she woke before me and slipped out without saying a word. I only noticed because the bed felt colder on her side, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. I checked the clock, 6:42 a.m. Too early for breakfast, too early for most activities on the ship. Something in my chest tightened. I dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt, and stepped into the hallway. The ship was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before the day really begins. I walked toward the upper decks, scanning for her. She wasn't at the buffet, she wasn't by the pool. Then, passing one of the smaller lounges, I saw movement through the glass doors. It was her, sitting in a corner booth, her hair still slightly damp from the shower, leaning forward with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Across from her sat him. They weren't touching, but the way they were looking at each other said more than any physical contact could. She was smiling in that warm, private way again, nodding as he spoke. He slid something small across the table toward her. Looked like a folded note, or maybe a card. She glanced down at it, then tucked it quickly into her purse, glancing around the room. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could have stormed in right then, made a scene, demanded answers in front of everyone. But instead I stepped back into the hallway, out of sight. If I confronted her now, she'd have excuses. She'd tell me I was imagining things. I wanted more than suspicion. I wanted the truth so undeniable she couldn't twist it. I spent the day shadowing her, pretending to be casual about it. Whenever she suggested we split up, she wanted to try the art auction, I wanted to hit the gym, I found a reason to run into her. Later. Twice, I caught glimpses of him nearby, never directly engaging with her in front of me, but always around. Like they were navigating the ship in tandem without ever being seen together for too long. That night, there was a deck party. Music, lights, people dancing under the stars. She claimed she was tired and wanted to turn in early. I told her I'd stay a bit longer. As soon as she walked away, I followed from a distance. She didn't head toward our cabin. She slipped down a side staircase to one of the lower decks, an area mostly empty at night except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. And there he was again, leaning against the railing, waiting. This time, there was no mistaking it. She went straight into his arms. I froze in the shadows, my back pressed against the cold metal wall, my breath coming shallow and slow. The ocean wind carried their voices in uneven fragments, bits of sentences slipping between the low thrum of the ship's engines. "I can't believe we're really here," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years, almost trembling, not with fear, but with something else. He chuckled low, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You deserve more than what you've got," he replied, his tone dripping with certainty, like this wasn't the first time he'd said it. I leaned just far enough to see them in profile. She was smiling up at him, that same small, private smile I'd caught her using before. His hand brushed her cheek, his thumb tracing along her jaw, and she didn't pull away. She leaned into it. I wanted to storm in, to rip her out of his arms and demand to know who the hell he thought he was, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt nailed to the deck, my stomach hollowing out with every second I watched. Then I heard her say it. "I wish we didn't have to hide like this." The words sliced through me, quick and clean, because in that moment, I understood, this wasn't a fling. This wasn't some shipboard flirtation. This had roots, history, a depth that made my marriage feel like a prop in someone else's story. He stepped closer, his hand sliding to the back of her neck. "Just a few more days," he murmured. "Then you'll know what you want." She gave a small, nervous laugh. "I already know." I pulled back before I could hear more, my heart pounding in my ears. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. If I confronted her now, she'd shut down, deny, twist it all into a misunderstanding. I'd be the jealous husband ruining our anniversary. No. I decided right there that I'd let this play out, collect every scrap of proof, and then end it on my terms. But as I walked away, one thought kept looping in my head, relentless and cold. What if she's already decided to end it on hers? The next day, I became a shadow. I learned her patterns. When she liked to slip away from the crowded decks, which hallways she took to avoid bumping into too many people, even the way she checked over her shoulder before heading somewhere she didn't want me to see. I made it look casual, timing my appearances so it seemed like coincidence, never letting her suspect I was watching. Around midday, she told me she wanted to spend a few hours in the spa. "You should go to the sports bar, watch your game," she said, like she was doing me a favor. I agreed easily, kissed her cheek, and let her walk away. But instead of heading to the bar, I kept my distance, trailing her down the hallway. She didn't go to the spa. She didn't even pass it. She took the crew stairwell, off limits to guests, and moved quickly down 2 decks to a restricted area I'd only glimpsed when we first boarded. I hesitated. If I followed her and got caught, I could be reported to ship security, even forced off at the next port. But the thought of her with him, alone, somewhere I couldn't see, burned hotter than my fear. I slipped inside the stairwell and crept down after her, careful to stay far enough behind that she wouldn't hear my footsteps over the hum of the engines. The door at the bottom opened into a dim service corridor. The walls were bare metal, the air warmer, smelling faintly of machinery. I caught sight of her turning a corner ahead. I followed, heart pounding, and stopped just before the bend. I could hear voices, hers and his, low but clear in the silence. "Are you sure this is safe?" she whispered. "Relax," he said, his tone smooth, almost amused. "No one comes down here unless they're working." I risked leaning forward just enough to see them. He was standing close to her, one hand on the wall beside her head, effectively caging her in. She was smiling, but there was something tense in her posture, like she wanted this but still felt the thrill of doing something forbidden. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She took it, opened it quickly, and scanned whatever was written inside. "You really think it'll work?" she asked. "It's already in motion," he said. "Once we dock, you'll be free." I didn't understand what they meant, but the implication hit me hard. This wasn't just about the two of them sneaking around. Something was planned. Something that ended with her being free. Free from what? From me? Before I could process it, a sound echoed down the corridor, footsteps from the other end. They both stiffened. "Go," he murmured. She hesitated, then brushed past him, heading back toward the stairwell. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath as she passed within feet of me, her perfume filling the air. She didn't see me. I waited until her footsteps faded, then peered back down the corridor. He was gone. My hands were shaking as I slipped back up to the guest decks. I had proof now, at least enough to know there was more to this than infidelity. And whatever they were planning, I had 4 more days at sea to find out before it was too late. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that service corridor with him, the way she'd taken that folded paper like it was a lifeline, the way he'd said, "Once we dock, you'll be free." Those words looped in my head like a siren. I kept asking myself, was she planning to leave me during this trip? Was she arranging something legal, something final? Or was there something darker I wasn't seeing? By morning, my mind was set. I had to know what was on that paper. I waited until she was in the shower, steam curling under the bathroom door, and slipped over to her purse. My hands moved quickly but carefully, rifling through the contents: lipstick, receipts from the gift shop, her phone, sunglasses. No folded paper. I checked every pocket, every zippered compartment. Nothing. Either she'd hidden it somewhere else, or she'd already passed it along. At breakfast, she was different. Almost lighter. She chatted about the day's port stop, how she wanted to explore the little shops near the dock, maybe buy souvenirs. But in between her bright smiles and casual touches, I caught her glancing toward the far end of the dining room. I followed her gaze. There he was, sitting alone at a table by the window, coffee in hand, eyes on her. They didn't speak, didn't wave, but something passed between them. An understanding. When we docked, she suggested I check out the historic fort the island was famous for. "You'll love it," she said. "I'll meet you for lunch after I do some shopping." My gut screamed not to let her out of my sight, but I played along. I pretended to walk toward the excursion buses, waited until she was lost in the crowd, then doubled back. I spotted her near the end of the pier, slipping into a side street away from the tourist stalls. I followed at a distance as she walked quickly, glancing over her shoulder once. Finally, she ducked into a small cafe. Through the open doorway, I saw him already waiting at a corner table. He slid a small envelope across to her, and she tucked it into her bag without opening it. They talked for a few minutes, their heads close together, her hand brushing his once, quickly. I couldn't hear what they said, but as they stood to leave, she was smiling in that same intimate way I'd seen too many times now. They didn't walk back together. She left first, blending into the crowd, and he lingered behind. When I met her for lunch, she was all sunshine again, asking about the fort I hadn't visited, showing me a trinket she'd picked up at a shop. No mention of the cafe, no sign of guilt. But I couldn't stop thinking about that envelope in her bag. What was inside? And why did it feel like it was the key to everything? That night, I decided I wasn't going to just follow her anymore. I was going to get my hands on whatever she was hiding. That night, she fell asleep faster than I'd expected. Or maybe she just pretended to. Her breathing slowed, her body curled away from me, and the soft rhythm of the ship's engines filled the silence. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, counting each rise and fall of her chest until I was sure she was deep in sleep. Then I moved, slow, deliberate, careful not to make the mattress creak. Her bag was on the chair by the balcony door. I eased it toward me, the zipper sounding deafening in the stillness. I searched methodically, checking the usual compartments first. Nothing. Then I felt along the inner lining and found a hidden zippered pocket I'd never noticed before. My pulse kicked up. Inside was the envelope. It was small, plain, no markings. I slid it out, holding it under the thin glow of the balcony light. My hands trembled as I worked the flap open. But before I could pull the contents free, she shifted in bed. A small sound escaped her, half sigh, half murmur. I froze, heart pounding in my throat. Seconds passed. She didn't move again. I glanced back at the envelope. I needed, to see what was inside. But then I heard it, the faintest click. My eyes darted to her nightstand, where her phone screen lit up. A notification. She reached for it without opening her eyes fully, swiped once, and set it back down. The light caught her face for a second, and I realized she was awake. I stuffed the envelope back into the pocket, zipped her bag, and slipped into bed just as she rolled over to face me. Her eyes were still closed, but her breathing was different now, too even, too intentional. We lay like that for the rest of the night, either of us moving, both of us pretending to be asleep. By morning, the envelope was gone. I checked everywhere, her bag, the drawers, even under the mattress. Nothing. She was cheerful over breakfast, humming to herself, asking if I wanted to try the couples massage that afternoon. But behind that bright tone, I caught it, something in her eyes that told me she knew I'd been looking. And if she knew I was onto her, whatever she was planning might happen sooner than I thought. I didn't bother pretending to relax anymore. Every laugh, every casual smile she gave me was just a performance now, a smokescreen to hide whatever was going on beneath the surface. And I knew deep down that time was running out. That afternoon, she told me she wanted to get some sun by the adult pool while I went to the trivia game in the lounge. I nodded like I believed her, then waited 5 minutes before slipping out of the lounge entrance and circling the deck. She wasn't at the pool. She wasn't anywhere near the sun. I spotted her down on the promenade level, walking with him again. They moved fast, not holding hands, but close enough that their bodies seemed in sync. I kept my distance, trailing them through the narrow side passages of the ship until they reached a door marked "Crew Only." She hesitated, glanced around, and he slipped a keycard from his pocket to open it. They disappeared inside. I knew following them directly would get me thrown off the ship if I was caught. But I also knew there were other ways in, service stairs I'd noticed during my earlier snooping. I cut through the art gallery, down a flight of narrow stairs, and into a hallway lined with supply closets. I could hear their voices faintly through the thin wall ahead. I moved closer, stopping just before the bend in the hallway, my back pressed to the cold metal. "He's suspicious," she was saying, her voice low but sharp. "I can feel it." "Let him suspect," he replied. "He can't do anything until we dock." There was a pause, then her voice again, softer this time. "And after? That's when it happens. You'll walk away, no drama, no mess. He'll be too shocked to fight it." She laughed lightly, but there was a tension under it. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," he said. "Everything's already set up. The papers are ready. You just sign and you're done." Papers. My stomach twisted. Divorce papers. She was planning to blindside me the moment we stepped off this ship. I pressed my hand to the wall to steady myself, my mind reeling. All the romantic dinners, The champagne toasts, the stolen moments on the balcony, it was all just a setup to make her exit cleaner. Their footsteps shifted, coming closer. I ducked into a nearby supply closet, the scent of cleaning chemicals stinging my nose. Through a thin crack in the door, I saw them pass, her smiling up at him resting a hand lightly at the small of her back. As soon as they were gone, I stepped out, my pulse still hammering. I finally had part of the truth, but knowing it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made me desperate. 4 more days until we docked. 4 more days to figure out if I was going to let her walk away quietly, or blow the whole thing apart before she got the chance. That I spent the rest of the day pretending to be the perfect husband. I laughed when she told stories at lunch. I held her hand during the afternoon show in the theater. I even kissed her on the forehead while we walked the deck at sunset, like nothing in the world was wrong. But every smile I gave her was a mask, hiding the storm that was building inside me. By the time we got back to the cabin that night, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait until we docked. If she thought she could blindside me with a quiet exit, she was in for a shock. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. She stepped out onto the balcony, wine glass in hand, her hair catching the light from the setting sun. For a moment, I just watched her, wondering how we had gotten here, how the woman I'd once trusted more than anyone could look so beautiful and yet feel like a stranger standing in my own life. I walked out, leaned against the railing beside her. "You've been spending a lot of time with that guy," I said, my voice steady but edged. She froze for half a second, then took a sip of wine. "What guy?" she asked lightly, like I just mentioned the weather. "Don't play dumb," I said. "Tall, dark hair, always just around. You meet him for coffee. You disappear with him into crew areas. You think I haven't noticed?" Her jaw tightened, but she kept her tone even. "You're being paranoid." I laughed, short, bitter. "Paranoid? I followed you. I heard you. Talking about papers. Talking about walking away." That got her. She turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "So you've been spying on me?" "I've been trying to figure out why my wife is sneaking around with another man on our anniversary cruise," I shot back. "And now I know." For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air between us electric with everything we weren't saying. Then she shook her head, almost pitying me. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I said, but she didn't answer. She just turned and walked back inside, shutting the balcony door behind her like she was closing a chapter. I stood there, gripping the railing so hard my knuckles went white, the sound of the ocean roaring in my ears. She just confirmed it, without confirming anything. And now I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. Not for her. Not for me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of her moving quietly around the cabin. She was already dressed, hairstyled, makeup perfect. "I'm meeting some of the ladies from the wine tasting," she said without looking at me. "We're doing a jewelry workshop." "Right," I muttered, keeping my tone flat. I let her leave without a fight. But the second the door closed, I was up, throwing on clothes, and following. I caught up to her 2 decks down. She wasn't heading to the jewelry lounge, she was heading to the aft of the ship, the quieter observation deck where hardly anyone went in the mornings. And of course, he was already there, leaning against the railing. This time, they didn't bother with subtlety. She walked straight to him, and he pulled her into an embrace that lasted too long for anyone to mistake as friendly. My blood boiled. I'd had enough. I didn't think, I just walked straight toward them. "Enjoying the view?" I said loudly, my voice carrying in the empty morning air. They both froze. She stepped back from him, her face paling. He, on the other hand, had the nerve to smirk. "Can we help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with mock politeness. "You can start by staying the hell away from my wife." I snapped out. A few early morning walkers had stopped a short distance away, sensing drama. I saw one of them pull out their phone. "Good. Let them record. Let everyone see," she hissed. "Keep your voice down." But I didn't. "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm done keeping anything down. I know you've been meeting him behind my back. I know about the envelope. I know about the papers. You want to walk away from this marriage? Then say it. Right here. Right now. Her eyes darted around at the small but growing audience. This isn't the place. It's exactly the place. I cut in. Because I'm not letting you spin some quiet little story about how you just fell out of love. People should know exactly what you've been doing while pretending to celebrate our anniversary. The man stepped in, his voice calm but condescending. Maybe we should take this somewhere private. I turned to him, my voice dropping into something colder. Stay out of this. You've done enough. The tension was thick enough to choke on. She looked between us, her hands trembling. I can't do this, she whispered, and then she bolted, pushing past the onlookers and disappearing down the stairs. He gave me one last look, a half smile that made my skin crawl, before following her. And there I was, alone on the deck, adrenaline still surging, a dozen strangers staring at me like they just witnessed the trailer for a scandal that was about to explode. By lunchtime, the story had already mutated into a ship-wide rumor. I couldn't walk into a lounge or pass a buffet line without feeling eyes on me. Whispers followed me down the corridors, snippets of overheard conversation blending into a fog of half-truths. Did you hear? Anniversary trip, some other guy on board, screaming match on deck 7. It didn't take long for the crew to get involved. A guest relations officer intercepted me outside the dining room, her smile overly polite, voice low. Sir, we'd like to remind you that all guests are expected to maintain decorum in public areas. Translation: keep your drama off the decks. I didn't bother explaining. Instead, I asked a question I knew would make her uncomfortable. Do you know who that man is? The one I confronted this morning? She hesitated, her professional mask slipping for half a second. Sir, I can't discuss other passengers. Which told me more than a straight answer could have. She knew who I meant, and she didn't like it. I decided to skip lunch and went back to the cabin, half expecting her to be there, maybe packing. But the room was empty. My eyes swept across the space automatically. Her bag was gone. The thought hit me hard. Was she already moving her things? Preparing for a quick exit when we docked, then I noticed something. The corner of an envelope sticking out from under her pillow. My heart kicked into overdrive. I grabbed it and opened it before my brain could warn me off. Inside was a single printed sheet, a document from a law office in our home state. My eyes scanned the bold header, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. The date was 2 weeks ago, and there, in the blank space for the filing attorney, was a name I didn't recognize, but the address listed was in the same city as the man she'd been meeting. Before I could process it, I heard voices in the hallway. Hers. His. They were coming toward the cabin. I shoved the document back into the envelope and slipped it into my pocket just as the door unlocked. She stepped in first, her eyes narrowing when she saw me standing there. You're here. Yeah, I said, my voice calm in a way that felt dangerous even to me. The man hovered in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe I should. No, I said, cutting him off. Stay. We're all here now. Perfect. For a few seconds, none of us moved. The hum of the air conditioning and the distant thrum of the ship's engines filled the silence, pressing in on my ears. She set her bag on the bed without taking her eyes off me, her expression somewhere between wary and defiant. He stayed just inside the doorway, like he was ready to bolt if things turned ugly. I took a step forward, keeping my voice low but steady. I know everything now. The meetings. The envelope. The papers you've been hiding. 2 weeks before this trip, you filed to end our marriage. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I saw her glance at him, just a flicker, but enough to confirm everything I'd been piecing together. Was this whole cruise just a warm-up? I asked. A way to make yourself feel better about walking away? Or was it your way of twisting the knife? She flinched, and for a second, I thought maybe there'd be an ounce of remorse. But then she straightened her shoulders. I was going to tell you when we docked, she said. I didn't want to ruin the trip. I laughed, short and humorless. Ruin the trip? You've been sneaking off with him every chance you got. You didn't want to ruin your trip. The man finally spoke, his tone calm but edged. Maybe you should step back before you say something you can't take back. I turned on him, my anger finally cracking through. Oh, I'm not taking anything back. You've been circling my wife for God knows how long, and now you're helping her destroy our marriage? You think I'm just going to smile and let that slide? He didn't answer, just held my gaze like he wanted to win some silent contest. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. Here, I said, tossing it onto the bed between them. You left it under your pillow. Guess you're not as careful as you thought. Her face strained of color. She reached for it, but I stepped between her and the bed. No. You can keep it. In fact, you can keep everything. I'm done fighting for someone who's already decided I'm not worth the truth. The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. For a long moment, she just stood there, the papers in her hand, looking at me like I was the one who had blindsided her. Finally, I grabbed my suitcase from the closet. I'll be staying in a different cabin until we dock, I said, my voice quiet now. And when we get off this ship, you won't have to hide anymore. You'll be free, just like you wanted. I walked past him without another glance, feeling the tension in the air follow me out into the hallway. As the door closed behind me, I realized something strange. There was no relief in her face. No satisfaction. Just uncertainty. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe she'd been planning to walk away from. But there was one more thing I needed to do. That morning, before we even stepped off the ship, I signed the papers. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of pulling us forward while she only walked beside me out of habit. The pen felt heavier than it should have, but when I set it down, something inside me felt lighter. She found me later on the deck, the sea stretching endlessly before us. She hesitated, then said, almost in a whisper, I never loved you. I thought I did, but I didn't. I just never had the courage to tell you. I wanted to leave quietly. I didn't flinch. I didn't even turn my head. I just let the words roll over me, carried away by the wind and the waves. For the first time in years, I realized the silence between us didn't hurt anymore. It felt like freedom. 10 years lost. But maybe now, I had finally stopped losing myself. What about you? Could you forgive someone who kept you close for 10 years, knowing they never loved you?